Imagine the world where genders have swapped places. Men have no say in who they marry. If a woman chooses you, that's it, you cannot refuse. Everything you own becomes hers the moment you wed. She decides how many children you have, and actually if she leaves you, children will stay with you just because they are considered father's responsibility. You cannot study law or medicine because universities do not admit men. You cannot become an engineer or businessman. These roles are considered too rough and demanding on men. You earn less than your female colleagues doing exactly the same job because economy considers you a secondary earner. When you come home after a full day of work, the home still needs cleaning, dinner cooking, kids put into bed, because that's what men do. Your body, your time, your future, everything is decided by others and justified by your gender. For centuries, this has been the reality for the woman in the most of the world. And in some parts, it still is. Hi, my name is Alice, and I'm happy to see you again on my channel, Ink and Coal, where I'm answering questions nobody asked. Today I'm not gonna answer a question. Maybe I will. I often hear the argument that it was always this way. It's the natural order of things, that God created women to obey men and follow them. But here is what science actually says. For most of the human history, for hundreds of thousands of years, before cities, agriculture, private property, people lived in small kinship bands with shared resources and no formal hierarchies. Roles existed. Men hunted more, women gathered more, decisions were made together. It was not a perfect equality. More skilled individuals earned more respect. But these hunter-gatherer societies were far more egalitarian than the farming civilizations that came after them. And the idea of one gender being superior to another simply didn't exist yet. And because children were raised communally, passed between caregivers, fed by the group, belonging to everyone, paternity barely mattered. But that would change at the moment there was a private property to inherit. The transition from hunting and gathering to farming triggered a fundamental shift in the power dynamics between genders. Farming created surplus, stored food, livestock, land, things that could be accumulated, owned, and passed down. And surplus created something that nomadic life never had: inheritance. Suddenly it mattered whose children were whose. Suddenly controlling a woman's body meant controlling the bloodline and the property that flowed through it. At the same time, farming communities needed more children than nomadic ones. Better nutrition meant more surviving births, but also meant more pregnancies. Now a woman could spend 20 or more years of her life being pregnant or nursing, bound to the home, her mobility severed. Men, meanwhile, monopolized spaces that required movement: the fields, markets, and war. The more mobile you were, the more political power you accumulated. And women, by biology and circumstances, were increasingly immobile. Another factor was patriarchality. Patriarchality is a pattern where women left their families and moved to their husbands' households, losing their network of mothers and sisters, while sons stayed home and accumulated land across generations. Male lineages became continuous, female ones were constantly interrupted, and continuity in the agricultural world meant power. War compounded everything. As settlements grew and resources became worth fighting for, men's physical advantages in upper body strength became military decisive. Men formed the warrior coalitions that defended and raided communities. Violence wasn't just a symptom of patriarchy, but one of its engines. Finally, ideology arrived to justify what economics and physical power had already built. It took different forms in different civilizations, but the function was always the same. In ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy, women were barred from public life and confined to inner rooms of the house. In Rome, the law placed women under the absolute authority of her father. In the earliest form of Roman marriage, she passed directly into her husband's control at the wedding, and in the later imperial period, most women remained tied to their fathers rather than their husbands, but they were never independent legal persons. Tertullian, one of the founding fathers of the Western theology, addressed women directly, and his words were not metaphorical. "You are," he wrote, "the devil's gateway." Woman was a descendant of Eve, the source of sin and seduction, too easily corrupted by the devil to be trusted with authority over herself, let alone anyone else. Confucian China codified the three subordinations: woman obedient to her father before marriage, to her husband after, and to her son in a widowhood. The Hindu Manusmriti prescribed the same dependency from cradle to grave, and the Domostroy in Muscovite Russia spelled out a wife's total obedience in a household manual. There was a list of prescriptions how to behave, how to treat your wife if she's not respectful enough to you. The concept of coverture in Victorian England made a married woman legally invisible. A wife had no legal existence separate from her husband. She couldn't sign contracts, couldn't be sued, couldn't keep her own wages. If she walked away, she couldn't keep her rights over her children either, because children were considered her husband's property. All these paradigms emerged on different continents in different centuries, but they all share the same underlying structure: that a woman belongs to a man, and that the order of things, natural or divine, requires her to remain so, canonizing the existing hierarchy. But patriarchy was not a biological necessity for human survival. Hunter-gatherer societies survived for hundreds of thousands of years without it. It emerged when agriculture made accumulation possible. Surplus beyond immediate need, private property that could be passed down, and wealth that could compound over generations. Once accumulation was possible, the competition for it began, and in that competition, physical strength and control over reproduction became decisive advantages. Patriarchy emerged from the world of subsistence farming, constant warfare, and reproduction as the only way to secure the future. But that world no longer exists. Technology replaced muscle in the fields a century ago. Contraception decoupled reproduction from destiny. The economy no longer runs on physical strength and hereditary land. Every material reason that once made patriarchy a functional adaptation has dissolved, and what remains is a pure inertia propped up by those who benefit from it. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to say that people who created the system were villains. Patriarchy wasn't driven by malice. It was driven by survival instinct operating rationally within the conditions available. Accumulate resources, control reproduction, secure the bloodline. Under agricultural conditions, power and wealth were simply the most reliable mechanisms for ensuring your descendants survived. The drive wasn't aberrant, it was logical. But here's what the science of cooperation tells us. The individualistic strategy was never actually the optimal one. As biologist Edward Osborne Wilson put it, within groups, selfish individuals beat altruistic ones. But groups of altruists consistently beat groups of selfish individuals. Humans are not strongest or fastest species on the planet. We survive because we cooperate. This is our primary evolutionary advantage, and cooperative groups consistently outcompete individualistic ones over time. Hunter-gatherer bands that shared resources had better collective outcomes than those who didn't. The more egalitarian the group, the more resilient it proved to be. Which means patriarchy was not just made obsolete by technology, it was arguably never the optimal strategy. Only the dominant one are the conditions that temporarily rewarded individual accumulation over collective survival. Personally, I see the patriarchy as an evolutionary stage that humanity has simply outgrown. And the next stage must be the one built on equality, on the interests of everyone rather than the dominance of some. And it seems not just possible but also obvious. The direction is clear. Today, in the countries we call progressive, it can look like the work is done, but scratch the surface and the structure is still there. And in much of the world, it never left. In Afghanistan, the Taliban has systematically erased women from public life since returning to power in 2021. Women cannot work, cannot travel without male guardian. There are written government decrees stating that a woman's voice in public is a form of immodesty. More than 2 million Afghan girls are banned from secondary education, and this is not history, this is today. In India, the Devadasi system persists despite being outlawed in 1988. Young girls, predominantly from the Dalit communities, the lowest caste, are dedicated to temple deities in religious ceremonies and subsequently enter a life of sexual exploitation, basically slavery. Over 48,000 Devadasi remain documented in country today, with girls as young as 12 being pushed to prostitution. The daughters of Devadasi become Devadasi themselves, and it's not because of religion, but because poverty leaves no other road. These girls are born to the system built to consume them. In Africa, female genitalia mutilation has been inflicted on over 230 million women and girls alive today, according to UNICEF. In Somalia, the rate is 99%, in Guinea, 96%. Every year, approximately 4 million girls more are at risk. It has no medical benefit. It exists for one reason only: to control female sexuality, to mark a girl as belonging to the system before she's old enough to question it. And these are not isolated footnotes. They are present tense of a story as old as civilization itself. And even in the West, the system has not disappeared. It just became more polite. The gender pay gap persists in every country on earth, no exception. Women perform approximately 75% of the world's unpaid care work. The expectations haven't gone anyway, they have been added to. A woman is now expected to be a full-time professional, the primary caregiver, and the household manager. Women come home from work to more work. And when they cannot do it all perfectly, the world calls it a personal failure rather than a structural one. The World Economic Forum estimated last year that at the current pace of change, full global gender parity is still 123 years away. And there is another argument that feminism doesn't always get enough credit for making, that patriarchy is not just bad for women, it's actively harmful for men too. Not in the same way, not with the same severity maybe, but the damage is real and measurable. The same system that stripped women of agency told men that they must be strong, dominant, and in control at all times, with no exceptions. You are either an alpha, a provider, protector, a winner, or you're nothing. There is no room for vulnerability, no space to say, I'm struggling. Globally, men die by suicide at more than double rate of women. Men are less likely to seek help for depression or trauma, not because they do not suffer, but because this culture told them that suffering is weakness, and they suppress what they feel until it has nowhere to go. Toxic masculinity doesn't serve most men. It only serves those at the very top of a hierarchy. Those who benefit from everyone else staying in their lane, staying silent and compliant. For every other man, it's a cage. It sends them to wars they didn't choose, makes them die earlier, drink more, be alone more than they want to be. Patriarchy doesn't liberate them, it conscripts them. But we can already see what the alternative could look like, and it works. In Iceland, both parents receive 6 months of paid parental leave, the majority of which is specifically reserved for this parent and cannot be transferred. Researchers show that fathers who take parental leave are more involved in childcare for years afterward, and their relationships with their kids are more stable. As a result, their children have better outcomes in life. Sweden introduced shared parental leave in 1974, and they were the first country who did that. In Norway, the earmarked fathers quota has driven uptake to 90% of fathers. Japan now offers fathers 12 months of paid paternity leave, the longest entitlement in the world. When boys are raised with permission to feel, are taught emotional intelligence instead of emotional suppression, encouraged to ask for help, to name what they experience, they grow into men with healthier relationships, lower rates of depression, and better outcomes across almost every dimension of well-being. They grow into men who see women not as competition or territory, but as equal partners, people to build a life with, without the crushing weight of being in charge for everything and never allowed to fall apart. Gender equality is not a redistribution of power that leaves men without anything, it's a liberation for everyone. Women pushed back from the moment the system existed, but it wasn't until the early 20th century that organized resistance became global and impossible to ignore. Carried by women who were imprisoned, force-fed, mocked, called unnatural and hysterical, and who kept going anyway. They didn't live to see the world they fought for, but they changed it. The progress is real. It is astonishing actually how much it has changed in just a century, but we owe it to them, to these women, not to forget that and not to waste it.